Alright, we're gonna go in the shop here now. I'm gonna I'll probably turn the camera on and off because there's a lot of projects in here that he don't want to film because they're customer deals. But it's got this is a rare tractor right here, isn't it?
It's a WK-40 1936.
McCormick Deering.
Yeah, so it's here for axle repair. And put an alternator on and stuff.
So you don't own this one?
No, I wish I did because this is a neat tractor.
Yeah, I've never seen one.
I don't think there's a whole lot of them in New Jersey. It might even be the only one. You know, it's more of a Midwest tractor.
Okay, that's pretty cool. All right. Yeah, we got something here. We're in a tight spot, and it's tough to film it because there's not much room. But this is another rare engine.
Yeah, this is a Ruston Hornsby HR diesel, 34 horsepower.
Wow.
You know, it's direct injected diesel. Back when this machine shop was put in here in the early 50s, you couldn't get anything more than a 60 amp service on the farm. So my grandfather needed power, so he bought this engine. He knew the guy that installed it brand new, 1935, and he knew it would come up for sale, so he went and bought it. He paid $1,200 for this in like 1953, which is a pretty big chunk of money for the engine, the generator, the panel board, and all the voltage regulator stuff, and set it up in the shop here to run it. And he ran a couple of years with it, and then the power company decided they didn't like people with big generators, so they ran the electric out to him after that. So if he only had the crystal ball, he didn't have to go through all that. But then again, if he didn't have it, they wouldn't have run it to him.
Right.
So the last run was 1959. Maybe someday I'll get around to cleaning it off and cleaning up some stuff, because injector stuff is all sticky, and a couple other things need to be torn apart and made freed up. But it's electric lighting version engine. The flywheel is 75 inches and 12 inches wide, and the flywheel weighs 2 tons.
Well, yeah, let me see if I can get a picture of the flywheel there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's over there. That's how tall is that? That's taller than me. 6 foot.
Yeah, it's down in the ground. There's a
Oh.
It's on a concrete foundation, and there's a pit on the other side where the flywheel goes down a little bit.
Wow.
You know, the crankshaft is 7 feet long. It's a 9 1/4 inch bore. You know, I have all the paperwork on this. I have correspondence from the factory to my grandfather. He bought new parts from him. I got new rings and valves and springs. You know, everything you need to tune it up. And when he rebuilt it, put all new bearings in it and new cylinder liner and stuff. So it's like basically a new engine.
It's crazy.
You know, so
It's
it's not a common engine for it to be in the United States, though, being it's English made.
Wow. Yeah, not much you can do with it, really. I mean, you can't run it.
No, not in here.
So yeah. So now it's just storage.
It's a giant shelf.
Yep.
Any flat spot becomes a shelf.
I hear you. I got a car that does that. What's this here, Rob?
This is a Cincinnati horizontal mill. This is made in about mid-60s or something, and then it's not set up anymore, but I just cut gears. This is a cam gear for a Bacchus engine that I'm building.
Pretty cool.
You know,
Cincinnati's a pretty big name, but you don't hear it as much because Bridgeport and
yeah, well, Cincinnati,
stuff.
they still exist in one form or another. You know, they're probably a division of some other big company now. They're building up probably some CNC stuff, but I don't think you can get any horizontal mills anymore. You know, so this was all done old school, dividing head indexed out. That gear was 66 teeth, so set it up. And I also made the crankshaft gears too, which is the last one's in here. This was set up for that.
this is how you make the gears with these little.
Yeah, so you want to index a space. This is set up to index 33 teeth. You would pull this knob out. Well, undo the lock. Pull this knob out, and you turn one past here, and you'd stop at that part of the sector arm, and that is one turn, 14 holes. Flip that to the next one. You take your cut. And you'd index again, one turn, 14 holes, flip that down, take your next cut, and that would give you, when you're all done, you made 33 grooves or 33 teeth, and they would be equally spaced. And you know, this is kind of infinitely variable. There's about 6 different plates. You can do almost a lot. You know, that's how it was all done. You know, as far as spacing goes. And then there was some oddball ones you need to differential index, which these don't do. You got to get a different kind of head for that. But
And this is a cutter up here, huh?
that's a cutter. That's a gear cutter. It's an involute gear cutter. It's got that gear tooth shape. There's 8 cutters per set for that size diametrical pitch. That happens to be number 9, which is a pretty oddball anymore. And 9 ain't been used in years and years. So I had to copy that because that was the center distance. So I did find some cutters down in North Carolina, which took a while to track down. So those gears, those are over on the saw. But
Oh, there's more of them here?
There's more of them here, yeah.
Wow.
There's 5 of them.
That's pretty cool. That would be really interesting to see something like that being cut. You know, you see a gear like that. Wow, this thing weighs a ton. You see something like this, and nobody has a clue about how that's made.
Yeah, there's a lot faster ways to do it on hobs and stuff, but I don't have one of them machines. So this eventually is going to get an eccentric machined around, and it's got a strap that runs around, and all it does is it pulls the push rod back and forth. You know, so that's a little project going. The big gear underneath it is 8-horse famous gear. So we had gear week here. So they've been accumulating around to get done. So finally, okay, we're going to cut gears. So
You're in the mood.
in the mood to cut gears. So we spent that. You know, you got about a 4 or 5 minute cycle time on each tooth. So you go over here and run the other machine, do something else, and then
4 or 5 minutes on a tooth, so
yeah. So you know, it takes a while. You're around there for a while.
how about that?
You know, but hey, some of this old stuff does take some time.
That's cool. All right.
You know.
What's going on up here, Rob?
All right, this is one of grandfather's design here. When this addition to the building was done, he needed trusses, and he also wanted to have a crane. So he built out the trusses. They're pipe on top and I-beam on the bottom, and that's also the crane rails.
Wow.
So there's 3 beams up there, and he carried the long beam on that because it's kind of backwards from when you normally do a crane. But so the building is also the crane. You know, and I've tested that. They're 1-ton hoists, and I've had that Cincinnati mill hanging on there, which I know weighs 5,000 pounds. So I know the ironwork is pretty darn good.
Does this I-beam slide this way?
The I-beam slides.
Does it?
The I-beam slides this way.
Oh, look at that.
That's all part of the building, and then it rolls
And then it goes this
way.
way. Wow.
You know. So grandfather was one of them old-time machinists. You know, you think about how to do stuff and salvage things. And
Right, right.
you know, the other part of the shop, it's as wide as it is because he salvaged parts out of a greenhouse to get the trusses, and he was short one and he fabricated one. So the building is as wide as the material was. Because back in the early days, you know, stuff was expensive, and you know, you took buildings down, you salvaged things like the soffits wood on the house. We took it out apart. Were signs from Flemington. They just turned them in and painted them green. You know, so you know, not much was wasted here on the farm and back at that time period. You know,
You didn't build the building by size, you built it by
you build it
your
by
materials.
your materials you had.
Huh.
You know, so
That's wild.
you know, I still do stuff like that. You know, and you want to build something. Okay, rather than go buy bolts, first you look on the rack, you see what size you have, and say, okay, these are going to be 1/2 inch, these are going to be 3/8, and it's got to be this. So you kind of, you know, you work a little backwards and use up things you have, especially for little fixtures and stuff. You know, if it was important for a customer, then we go get stuff. But you know, if you're just making something temporary, or
Yeah, no, that's
you
just the
need
way it is.
something,
Yeah.
You know, hey, you know, because we're great pack rats as far
Exactly.
as salvaging things. You know,
Yeah. Well, that's, you know, everybody sees it, they look at it and they say, oh, look at all that junk. You know, it's not junk to us.
no.
You know, that's our next job.
You know, like up on top of that long wooden box up there, those are piston patterns and core boxes for 12 horse, 15 horse famous, 8 horse famous. So I do a lot of pattern work.
That's useless to 99.9% of the
The
United
population.
States, right?
Yeah, but you know, it's like, yeah,
But
you
it-
need something. I got a nice connection with a foundry out in Amish land. They do phenomenal work with minimal patterns. You know, where a lot of regular foundries, they want to have a professional pattern on a board. These guys, you give them a little piece of something, a little clay and some tape on places, and they'll wiggle it in the sand, and they'll make you a little casting up. So yeah, they do phenomenal work for, you know, for really reasonable cost. You know, and I've been out there, and you know, they got a heck of a work effort. They got kids 8 years old out there helping with busting up iron, and these kids, you know, they come out and they're trying to lift things that weigh how much as them do just to help out. It's like, you know, phenomenal. Nice family.
Oh, there's our compressor. I'm going to shut you down.
Make some noise.
Here's something is odd. What is that, Rob?
This is a Dake brand arbor press. It's a, you know, floor standing model. Dake is still in business. What most people don't know is Dake used to build engines.
Oh,
There's
yeah?
the Dake square piston engine. This actually says the Dake Engine Company on it because it's a fairly old one, and I did look it up and I found some pictures. They built what they call a swinging arm engine, and basically it's got a square rack that goes in and out, and it was for on the old steam shovels when when the boom comes out. Well, it operates that, and that's what the Dake Company used to build before they got into regular arbor presses and hydraulic presses and stuff like that. Someday I ought to contact the company and ask them if they have any literature on that, but it was the Dake Engine Company originally.
And they're still in business, right,
They're
Dake?
still in business, yeah.
It's wild. Interesting. All right, Rob, you showed me them things up there, and the people probably don't even realize what they are. You know, the piston,
The piston patterns and core
patterns,
boxes.
yeah.
This is for like hit and miss engines. You know, a lot of those
Right.
are 1910 and back or something. And so, you know, it's basically old foundry work now. I got a smaller one here.
All right, you got one here.
I'm going to show everybody how this works. Basically, this is what they call a core box, and this is the reverse image of the inside of the piston, which is that.
All right, that's pretty good. This is actually the piston.
This is the raw piston.
This is what a piston starts as.
Yeah, this is for a Springfield engine. Okay, so what they would do is they use special sand called core sand, which they bake and it stays in its shape, whereas like your regular mold sand is going to be kind of, you know,
A little looser.
friable or something there. So this actually will stay in this shape. So they'll fill this with core sand. They've got no bake stuff now, so when it dries, and they'll make two of those, and they'll put the two pieces together. And what you'll have there is a round cylinder with a disc on the end, and the disc on the end of that corresponds with the disc on the end of this. And this is the outside part of the pattern. They ram this up in the mold. This has got draft in a couple different directions, so you can pull it out. And they would pour it standing up. So they open up the mold, they take those two halves of cores together, put them together, and they would register in this diameter, which is going to make a groove in the mold. You know, run their gates and their runners and the vents, and then they would pour. And then when you're all done, you'd chip out all that core sand, and you'd have the inside part like that. So that's how a piston was made, right out of 1860s on up until you know, commercial molding, and they made, you know, metal patterns and stuff there. But that's, you know, how it's done the hard way,
yeah.
one of a kind. You know, I've made.
And what happens is the outside gets machined, right?
This will all get machined. It'll get a wrist pin bore.
The wrist pin will go right about the middle.
Right about the middle. The rings will be in here. You know, face the ends off and stuff, and you can, you know, clean it up, and then you drill a couple holes in there for set screws for the wrist pin that goes across the bore.
You can actually see where the wrist pin's going to go through.
Yeah, right in
That's
there.
pretty cool. But that's what a piston starts out as, the old-fashioned way.
The old-fashioned way. That's what it would look like, and that's how it would have been made.
Wow.
You know, not so much in a production basis, but early engines were built in batches where they might build 5 or 10 of one size, so they would go through the foundry guys to do it. You know, it was all complete machine shop job. A lot of it was done on hand-operated machine tools. You know, right down to making their own bolts.
And something like that would be about what? About 3-4 horse maybe?
That's actually in a 1-horse engine.
1 horse.
Wow.
Now what's this over here?
This one is on a 3-horse engine.
Wow. Look how big it is. That thing's got to be 14 inches.
Yeah, it's damn near 14 inches, and it's 38 3/4 pound is a raw casting, and that'll finish up at I think that one's 5 inch bore.
Is that the pattern right next to it there?
This is the outside pattern. The core box right now is MIA, but it's here someplace.
Yeah, we'll find, somebody probably use it for firewood.
I hope not, because it took me about 4 or 5 hours to make that.
That's pretty cool. That's something you guys you're never going to see this anywhere else.
Well, I wouldn't say that. There's a handful of places that'll do it, but
Not on the YouTube TV.
no, you never know.
Check out Road King's channel. You don't know what you're going to see.
Road King knows where all the cool stuff is.
It is. All right, I'm not going to show them everything.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to keep something in the archives here.
Yeah, it might need to be another video.
Yep. All right, let's find something else. Here's something you don't see in an American machine shop very often, made in England.
Yeah, it's an English-made shaper. That's what is that? 24-inch? Yeah, 24-inch travel. Universal shaper. It's kind of an old-timey machine. They don't make them anymore. They're slow, but they do a nice job of making a wide, flat surface with a very cheap tool bit, as opposed to a really expensive machine with a really expensive cutter. So, and there's some jobs on keyway cutting and things that they're handy for, and I've used it for quite a bit of things, planing off some engine bases, and these engines that I'm building. You know, I like to use the shaper because it gives you the old lines, the machine lines, as opposed to a circular cutter, so it gives a little more authenticity to the project.
That's cool.
You know, and it's a cool machine to run, actually.
Okay. So I got 22 minutes left on this battery. I got a spare battery, but
Okay.
we got to keep this in mind.
All right. So,
Tell me about this one, Rob. I know this one is really unique.
all right. This is a replica of a one-horse Springfield engine. They were built by a fellow up in New York State, and I bought his pattern because I wanted to have one. And I'm tweaking a few things, changing a few things around, and making a few things a little more historically correct. Doing some pattern work and things. That's like 600 pounds for 1 horsepower, and their design was in 1896. About half of it's apart right now, but this is one of the first fuel-injected engines that was out there. It's a side shaft with a cross shaft to operate all the valves. There's like 6 cams on here and all kinds of crazy stuff. The mixer's off of it right now, but there's a handful of these around. I think maybe about 40 of them original, from anywhere from this size of 1 horse on up to I think a 25 horse, which is really huge. Cool Springs Power Museum out in Western PA's got a real nice 10 horse in there. And there's a few other around. Some private collectors have them. Quite unique engine. Lots of bells and whistles, and there's belt-driven governor. You know, so you know, if it was a little more of it together, you could see a little bit better of it. But that might have to be another tube.
Right. That'd be a whole new video. But what's interesting about this is like a little model engine that you see these guys build, the little tiny things. But this thing is
full size.
This is full size.
This is
and everything, every part on this is what, forged and made. And
it's all cast. So there's not much in forging, but you know, it's a lot of things machined out of bar stock. But you know, all the castings are made. It's hollow. It's cored out for a water jacket. Flywheel's done. The fuel tank is very close to original. There's a couple things that are a little bit different, you know, than the original, but it's a pretty good facsimile of
what it was
originally. You know, there's only I think maybe 6 or 7 of these in existence original.
Wow, look at the size of this crankshaft. Holy
Christ. That's a little bit on the big. Well, that's actually a cover on the end.
Oh, is it?
But,
I was going to say that's.
I do have the cranks made for them, so I'll show everybody what that looks like.
I was going to say I thought this was the size of the crankshaft. My God, that's like 4 inches.
Yeah, so,
oh, here you go. Here you go. It's a lot better.
Yeah, so now you can see what the crankshaft looks like. I built 5 of these. So I had a crankshaft day earlier this year. It took me 20 hours a piece to make these things, and this was made from a solid plate of steel that was cut out, roughed that shape, turned, roughed. It had blocks on here for extra centers. You held them offset so they turned around the crank pin, turned, cleaned, polished. They still got a little bit more work to finish them up yet, you know, cut the keys in. So I mean, I'm pretty happy about that. So you know, how they came out.
What is that actually made of? Just regular?
It's a regular A36, you know, mild steel. Okay. A little rusty in here in the damp.
No, that's why this. I was looking at it thinking it might even be stainless steel until I seen the surface rust.
No, it's all just turned out of a really ugly rusty plate I had laying around because it's clean underneath when you machine it off.
It is.
So we had a busy couple of weeks there.
It is. Beautiful workmanship, buddy.
Yeah. And there's one of the flywheel castings here.
So this is what they start out as, right? Casting.
Yeah,
that's not even a flywheel. It's just a casting.
Yeah, that's just everything has to be turned on the outside and bored and cleaned up and done, you know, and then that'll go in there.
Eventually.
Eventually, and there's actually 10 of these laying around.
Wow. Okay. All right, I got all my machining done. I'm ready to go. Why don't you give yourself a plug, Rob? If somebody wants to contact you and buy an engine or sell an engine or get some machine work done, where can they get hold of you?
Well, you can look up on the smokestack, which is on Harry's old engine page. And
okay, that forum.
Yeah, Road King's going to give you a link someplace on there. I got a business card ad on the page. You look under the sponsors page, and my contact information is on there. There's an email, there's a phone number, stuff. You know,
okay.
We do a lot of hit and miss engine work, and
probably one of the only guys that does hit and miss engine work around the area. I mean, the only guy that knows anything.
New Jersey, I'm one of the few. But there's a few out there. But we tinker a lot of stuff. We do some really weird repairs.
Right.
You know, get some castings made up, and buy and sell an engine or two. You know.
Yeah.
Tinker and then general machine shop. You break it, we fix it.
Yeah. So that's it.
That's it.
It'll be check out the smokestack forum, and I'll leave a link there. And like I say, He can do just about anything here, this little shop. All right. We'll see you later, Rob.
See you later.
Thanks for your help.
See you.
John?
Bye-bye.
All right.